Hey, welcome back to the DNA Dojo podcast. And today we're going to start our series on strikes and targets of those strikes and where those targets go, what type of hand strike works for what type of targets, and we'll get into a discussion about that. So when I bring that to mind, what pops in your head when we talk about that?
I was thinking, when you brought this up to me last night, the first thing I was thinking about was how do you train more vicious strikes? I guess that might not be the right word, but the thing I was thinking, because we usually...
More effective strikes, right?
Yeah, so when we were doing more self-defense stuff, it would be like, oh, say you get to the side and you have like a standing arm bar, which... but you like throw an elbow to the side of the head or like throw a chop to the throat. Like you don't really train that stuff. You kind of can like short sell it and just like tap them so you know it's there. But that's
we do. I mean, in
yeah.
Kempo, we do train that way. And even if you're going for soft targets, I know we train. You get to a certain point where you have to be very accurate, and you're striking, and you could just tap. And I've had training partners go, and these are guys that are not weak at heart or warrior spirit, and you keep tapping them in the same spot and they're like, man, that's hurting. I'm like, dude, I haven't hit you with any kind of power or anything.
Yeah,
I'm just hitting you in the
flesh.
same spot over and over again. He goes, well, that's what's really getting me. So it's kind of like that Chinese water torture old mythology, I guess. So I guess if you had to basically go down, I think that as just people in general, that we normally want to just close our fists. I've seen a lot of different hand formations on people that close their fist, and some of them are just horrendous. Some of them people could break their hand. So I always teach the proper way is to curl your fingers in, and then make a nice tight fist, and then get that thumb tucked on the outside, make it like a nice rock, and just squeeze.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I've always been taught.
So that's how I teach it. I mean, I've seen people like put their thumb where it's pointing out, and I'm like, that's never good because you're gonna jam it or get it called on somebody. And I've seen other people wrap their hand around their thumb.
Yeah, that's a very bad idea.
No.
Yeah, that's how you blow your thumb out.
You break your whole hand. The other thing I see is people that have weak hands. They do like the little, they kind of keep them open.
Yeah.
And that's not good. I think I have a lot of great forearm development because I do not just from the fist, but other hand formations that I train, that it definitely develops the forearm.
Yeah.
So you can squeeze. And the more you squeeze, the harder that fist is going to be.
Right.
So that's the first thing. So with that, with the fist, you have to be careful where you strike.
Right.
We're not even.
I was going to say, assuming we're talking barehanded strikes at this point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you have a closed fist, I mean, the closed fist isn't actually the best maybe in a street fight all the time because you can get dinged up. I mean, you could break your hand if you're not training and not targeting the correct punch. So let's talk about that. So when you do hit, you want to be hitting with those two big knuckles on the front of your hand. A lot of people don't know that. There's people that just punch just for the sake of punching.
Now, when you say that, are you referring to the index and the middle finger, or the?
Yes, exactly. Sure. Because the other, if you notice, people make a fist, that those two are the most prominent. And if you hit with those, you have the whole support of that bone structure coming down into that small area. And that's going to be straight. No matter if you're just throwing straight or hook punches, we can get into that in a little bit more detail. The mechanics of it. But as long as you're coming down. So that's why it's good to kind of study in a traditional sense when you're starting out with martial arts from a horse stance, and your shoulders are back, your chest is up, your hands are at elbow position, and you're learning how to strike out and twist the punch and stuff like that, and you're learning your targets, because then you're learning to train yourself to really focus on those knuckles. Now, if you hit with your your ring finger and your pinky knuckle, it's going to collapse. I mean, you could see that it's just not built. It's going to collapse the hand.
That's like a famous injury called a boxer's fracture, isn't it? Like
That is correct.
why
Yeah,
it's called
and
that.
you will get a big, huge lump between those two, and it's so easy to get that because that easily breaks. You know, so that's when we're talking about if you're throwing a jab, a cross, you know, some type of thrust punch, and then depending upon the target, you're gonna change the position of your hand to get into those targets. So, so definitely, I would say if you take probably the first strike, people realize, and this is another thing I have to explain quite a bit to the students coming in, is the jab. So the jab is off your lead hand. So whatever foot that you have forward, that's your jab. Your cross is going to be from the rear hand.
And I hear a lot of people refer to the jab as like the range punch. Is that, do you use it to range, like, do you have a different use for it? Is that pretty much what you use it for too? It's just like, I mean, you're obviously you're making contact, but it's like ranging them out so you know how far you are.
Well, I think the first thing with the jab is you keep pumping it out there and you're going, this is a no-fly zone. If you come in here and you just walk in here, I'm going to punch you right in the face. Okay, that's how it's going to be. And it does help you find your range, and you can figure it out pretty quick. Because if you've been hitting the bag and doing footwork drills on the bag, you know, moving in and out, and footwork's a whole nother discussion series we're going to do. But
do you think, since we're talking bare hand strikes right now for the most part, I think framing it also that this is more of a self-defense focus for just this section, I think is probably a something that should be of note, because obviously if you put pads on, you're wearing 16-ounce gloves, your strikes are going to change up a little bit. Not the mechanics overall, but just like your targets in general. But yeah, I think with that being said, the reason I wanted to say that is if you're in a street situation, what are your targets looking like? Like, where are you aiming for? If you're like, obviously it's a dynamic situation, but in general, are you like, because you always see in the movies people throwing jabs up towards the head or like aiming to the head, but obviously with no gloves on, like you can easily shatter your hand on someone's forehead, or God forbid you get in their teeth and they cut your hands up and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, if it's self-defense, your adrenaline's going to be running high. You know, you're going to be amped up anyway. So
yeah. I mean, not that it's going to be a fight stopper if you do hurt your hand, but obviously you want to mitigate that as much as possible.
We have a word that we use. It's called GENTS. It's groin, eyes, nose, throat, shins, which is basically some major centers of targets to go after. Okay, so if I'm using the jab and you're trying to come in, and maybe you're trying to bum rush me, and I'm going to hit you right on that nose. What happens when you get hit on the nose?
Just like a shark.
Your nose is going to bleed. Okay. If it doesn't bleed, your eyes are going to water, or you're going to have both. Then you're going to have blood running down the back of your throat. Pretty much, depending upon the climate and the individual person. You hit somebody hard enough, I mean, you break that nose, they can't. What are they going to do? So that's going to stop somebody. I mean, somebody that's irrational, probably not right at first, but it's going to start slowing them down because they're not going to be able to breathe.
Right.
So then what happens? The mouth drops open.
Yep. And
so then that's lights out, baby.
Yeah.
You hit them on that sweet spot on the jaw, and the head goes one way and the brain bounces inside that skull, and they're out. And that's a defense mechanism. The body just shuts itself down.
Now, I guess also coming from framing it inside self-defense. Now, and this is going to be kind of a weird question, but would you focus on striking and then let me ask it this way. So for me, when I was training a lot of jiu-jitsu and self-defense, it was a lot more, we would use a lot of pain compliance type stuff, so hitting joints and like stuff that's going to make it hurt really bad, but striking came second to that. Like, obviously if we need to enter, we're throwing a huge punch, but it would be a lot more of like closing the gap, getting control, taking control, bringing them to the ground in like a technical side mount type deal. But striking typically was always second to that. Now, in your aspect, are you doing more just pure striking and then just trying to get them to the ground and then that's the end of it? Or like what kind of, I guess, what's your start to finish look like?
My mindset on that is I'm going to try to do the most effective thing to interrupt them as possible. Now, grappling and joint manipulation and pain compliance has its place.
I was going to say, I guess I'm framing more of like a style versus style question there and not necessarily a strike.
No, not necessarily, because in BJJ classes where they've tried to teach a self-defense aspect and it was very minimal, and it's like, okay, we're going to do a grip break. Okay, well, that's great. Let's do that. If the guy's got, big hands and big fingers, he's going to wrap around, and it's going to take you a long time. I mean, it's going to have to develop to get out of that. So we were working a drill on that, and I told my partner, who was, a younger, taller person, probably like much taller than me, and I said I would never do this in a self-defense application. And he goes, well, what would you do? So for me, I hammer strike the radial nerve, and I drove him down, kind of like doing an inside block to the arm that he was holding me on. So what did that do? That broke his posture, because now it's pain, and I'm pulling you down, out, and then it's standing position, because who's going to grab you from sitting position? So I mean, so you have it. I know where that hand is. I know where the other hand is. So now I drop. So even if you're going to come at me with the other hand, I could come back and block it.
And your posture so broken at that point, you just...
Yeah, or it's just a hammer strike right to the face. And that's what I did. I went, pip, pip. And he's like, dude, I didn't even see that coming. And because that's how quick it was. So I think that it's handling things in a quick manner.
That kind of sounds similar to a move we used to do called the elbow drop, which is very like you'd hit in that area between basically like upper forearm elbow and just drag them down. And I mean, they'd collide, it would destroy their posture very quickly. But yeah, I mean, that strike is always right there. And I guess maybe that's more what I was thinking is like, at what opportunities do you strike versus, so for us, it was like opportunistic, like his head's down. All right, hit him. Because ultimately, when it comes down to it, like you can have all the legal discussions and like, oh, well, you don't want to do, but it's like if you're in a fight and again, framing in the street aspect, I always assume they're just trying to kill me or at least beat me to the point where I'm going to be severely injured. And because I mean, you see videos left and right of people just getting soccer ball kicked in the head while they're down. It's like, I don't want to be there. That's permanent damage. So in that aspect, it's just like, I assume even if they're barehanded, they're still probably going to try and kill me and beat me to a pulp. So why not return the favor? And so in that aspect, I guess it would be like I'm going for the throat, the eyes, the soft targets, but in the opportune moments.
No, that's exactly right. That's what you want to do. I mean, and I just reinforced my philosophy on sport against self-defense. And somebody else brought it up in a very succinct quote that there are no rules in self-defense. If you're not supposedly cheating, I don't see it as cheating.
Right.
You're surviving.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a difference between
you're not
like a
trying.
spirited bout on the street where it's just too
right.
Yeah.
If you have a ref, if you have other people in there and they're monitoring things, and I mean, yes, that's a sport. Yes, you could get the shit knocked out of you in a sport, but there's people watching out for your better interest because you know that they're going to be like, hey, man, you're done. Your warrior spirit might want you to keep going, but your body's telling us something totally different. We need to stop this so you don't get damaged. But in self-defense, you don't know to what degree that fight's going to go to. You don't know how motivated that attacker is. You don't know how desperate they are. You don't know how many drugs they've been doing. You don't know how drunk they are. You don't know anything. You don't know if they have mental issues. I mean, look at all the things that are going on in the major cities now,
Right.
especially with people that they arrest them, they lock them up, and then they let them go. There was another incident just recently in New York on the subway. There was I believe he was an ex-Marine that was on the subway, and there was a gentleman that was on there and he didn't know it, but this guy had a lot of, at least 2 or 3 dozen previous arrests for assault. Okay, so this guy kept engaging the Marine to the point where it's like, okay, I need to deal with this guy. Like, I can't continue to let this guy do this because it's going to keep ramping up. So he did get control from the reports I've read, and the guy kept struggling, and he ended up killing the guy.
Was that the one where he was on the ground like choking him out? Was that video?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I did
yeah.
see parts of that. I didn't know that in context. I just saw him like.
I hadn't seen the video, but I had seen. I had read the reports of what had happened, and now they want to they arrested the guy, the Marine, and they took him in and they released him, but there's people
that want to charge him.
One side of the aisle that say, oh, this was murder and this was that, and I'm like, what about the other 3 dozen times the other guy committed assault, and now you got a Marine that this is his first incident and stuff, and he's just trying to protect the public.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, removing, I mean, not to get into a legal conversation, but like removing all background of anything you know. If you put 2 folders on a desk and said, this is guy A and this is guy B, this is guy A's offense and this is guy B's offense, you'd be like, why was this guy not charged prior? Look at all this stuff. And now but
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I did see that video. And I didn't know he died. I don't know how he died, but, I guess that's probably more of a legal question. I was gonna say,
he got choked out.
That's what I saw. So I saw him getting choked out. Now, I don't know if the dude held the choke for way too long, but if, I'd have to assume if you're hopped up on drugs or something and you're getting choked out and you're not going out, but you're losing a severe amount of blood because the drugs are basically keeping you afloat, I could see how that would eventually be like, hey, there's like, you're basically having a heart attack, but your heart's still pumping because of the drugs. And that I don't know. That'd be interesting to look into, and like kind of a whole. I guess that could be a potential part of this series is talking about, like using lethal strike, and I kind of use that very loosely in terms of like.
Well, it has to be within reason, but I think that you can get. I think you really need to, like, I'm part of U.S. Law Shield.
Yeah, same.
And that's my insurance for handguns, to protect me, to answer questions, because that's what they do. They have legal representation in every state. You can join it per one location or state, or you can join it nationally and be covered for that. So that's for that. It would be nice, or maybe they should create an offshoot of U.S. Law Shield that goes beyond just the weapon.
They do. At least they did. When I first signed up for it, there was, and this is going to sound like an endorsement, but they did have, I think it was just like bare hands and knives or something like that. Because I remember specifically signing up for it. At least that's what I thought when I signed up for it, because I'm pretty sure they said like bare-handed use or no lethal weapon used or something like along those lines. I'll have to go back and check.
I'll have to look at my policy and see what it says.